Hello, and welcome to my next video in the Fantasy Grounds tutorial series. In this video, I will go over what you need to do to create the framework your Fantasy Grounds campaign will be stored in. This means setting up a name, explaining the various hosting options that are available to you, and covering the settings around those hosting options so that you can understand how to use them. Additionally, I explain what rule sets and extensions are available initially, and show you how to select and activate them. Finally, I show you how to load your campaign once you have closed out of it at some point, so that you can continue at a future date. Now that you have a handle on how the Fantasy Grounds launcher works when it comes to the Unity edition, I'm going to go through the process of showing a DM how to go through and create a particular campaign. So before I actually choose a particular rule set here, I just want to point out a couple of things that are on this particular interface. Where it states name and then you have that campaign name text box, that is literally just going to be the campaign name that you are going to tell your players to look for if you're going with the lobby option for hosting your campaign. They'll use that name in combination with your username, which is in the upper left portion of the screen, but the lower left portion of the actual banner. They'll use those two pieces of information to find you in the lobby, and that's if you're going to do or host your campaign through the cloud option. Campaign details lets you choose that, and you have two options when it comes to cloud. That's public and private. If it's private, then players will have to go through the process of entering in a password to be able to connect to your campaign. If it's public, anybody can join. Excuse me. Whereas if you choose LAN, like I have here, then you're going to want to put in password and GM name information, as well as choose a port if you're not going to use the port option. And there are two differences here. If you're going to choose LAN, you can use an internal network and or potentially the external network to allow a player to connect to your server. However, if you're going to allow players to connect external to your network, you're going to have to understand the capabilities of opening up ports on your router or your firewall to allow those players to come through, and it has to match the port that you have selected here. If you don't do that, players can't get connected to your system. This is the reason why the cloud feature was added, because it simplifies that process for those players and DMs who don't want to go through that particular process of doing that. And I should say DMs, it's not so much the players. Players, you don't have to really do anything when it comes to opening or closing ports, regardless whether you choose LAN or not. However, there are some countries where ISPs don't allow players to connect to another player or a DM's system if they're hosted on that particular ISP. And that's mainly the problem from the DM perspective rather than the player perspective. And there are options like VPN software that might help solve that, or other cloud hosting options that might solve that. I can't think of the name of the software that I had in mind, but there are different options, and you can find references to that on the Fantasy Grounds forums. Cloud, however, eliminates the need for all of that. And literally what you do is you choose whether you want to show or allow players to connect privately or publicly or not. And I do believe in a public campaign you can still set a password. And I can go through that particular process and show you how that works in another video here. The rule sets that are listed there are the rule sets that come freely available with Fantasy Grounds. And you can get supplements for them. For example, I have a large number of 5th edition modules, but I don't have any modules for the other ones except for maybe a Pathfinder, a couple of Pathfinder modules that I took advantage of during a humble bundle special of some kind. And same with Starfinder. I think that came with the same package, but I don't know anything about those two. I actually haven't used those yet. Which is primarily why the videos that I'll be covering are mostly going to focus on 5th edition. I do have some experience with 2nd edition, but not in Fantasy Grounds. I used to play Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which is built out of 2nd edition. I believe it's an advanced version of 2nd edition. And so those are the two fields that I have experience with at this point, is 2nd edition and 5th edition. At the bottom of the particular screen are two particular network options. So you have an internal and external IP that are being listed there. The internal IP, just one second here, I seem to have lost my mouse, there it is. The internal IP is your LAN network. And you can click on this little box that's coming up here to actually copy that into your clipboard and paste it. Make it easier for you to paste it around. But if you choose that option, players have to be physically connected to the exact same network that you are attached to be able to connect to your system. The external one, which is here, and I've got these grayed out so you cannot see the numbers, which is why my mouse disappears there. This allows players that are outside of your network to connect in using the LAN option, and both of those cases are going to be for the LAN option. However, you have to understand how to be able to open up those firewall rules that I was telling you about earlier. And the IPv6 version here is literally just the exact same thing except for the new IPv6 protocol rather than the IPv4 protocol. And if you don't understand what that means, that's perfectly fine. Mine are blank simply because of the fact that I've disabled IPv6 in my network for the time being. So that's the reason why you're only seeing a : 1 here. And that's essentially how you go through or what all of those fields mean. So now that I've selected a rule set here, you'll see that this particular extensions field has populated with some information. One thing you'll see here is there will be a number of themes, and that list of themes might be different depending on the rule sets. Now, I think all of the default rule sets that are here have the same list of themes. But if you have a theme that is only specific to 5th edition and it's listed here, it won't show up in any others. Like I believe, for example, that this one here, the Wizards theme, is specific to 5th edition, and that appears to be the case. So that is a perfect example of a theme that is unique to a given rule set. And it goes to show that themes are tied to a rule set as opposed to being available across the board. In addition to the themes, there are language fonts, and they are also specific to a particular rule set. Now, in this particular case, if you're looking at the 5th edition version here, the language fonts represent racial languages specific to the various types of races that you can play in 5th edition, such as Dwarvish, Elvish, the Halfling, Gnome, stuff like that. Not all of them have their own unique language that is provided by the language fonts package, but a good number of them do. And it allows you to communicate to players or players to communicate back with you in a way that provides some level of secrecy outside of the whisper mechanism. And what I mean by that is that, let's say they're going through a particular dungeon and you've got a party made up of 1 dwarf, 3 elves, which I don't know how that would ever work, but anyway. And only the dwarf can speak Dwarvish, that they're all communicating to each other with common. And there's writing on the wall that they come across, and it happens to be in Dwarvish. Maybe they're in an old Dwarvish ruin of some kind. Only that dwarven character will be able to read the content of that particular writing on the wall, which means you as the DM can type it up in the chat window, select the Dwarvish font, and send it over in a language that the 3 elf characters won't be able to read. All they will see is the pictograms that represent the Dwarvish language. The dwarf player, or the player controlling the dwarven character, will be able to see it in a language that they themselves can comprehend. Now, in my particular case, that would be English. I think Fantasy Grounds is internationalized for different languages, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I've only ever dealt with the English language. It's the only language I can actually speak, to be honest. Additionally, the FR language font package that is here, that is specific to Forgotten Realms. Toril, Faerun, Forgotten Realms, whatever you want to call it. That adds languages for the races that are added and specific to the Forgotten Realms world. So if that's where you tend to run your campaigns, then you'll probably want to have both of these particular language font extensions enabled. Now, this next one isn't necessarily going to be readily available unless you yourself have purchased modules. And they are not necessarily rule set specific. And you'll see that even though I have different rule sets available to me, this list of extensions that are really desktop decals doesn't seem to be changing. And that's because decals themselves are not specific to one particular rule set. That was something that I had made a mistake on in a previous particular video. I had questioned why that was the case, and someone was kind enough to clarify that for me. Um, but what these are think of it as a desktop background that you can present to a particular group of players that are connected to your system. And you don't get to choose who they go to. So once you set it, it's presented to all of your players. But you might change that depending on the campaign that you're running through. And when you create the campaign, you can choose the decal that is presented as part of that particular campaign. So it allows you to, oh crap, I'm in the wrong campaign, or give the players a little bit of a hint as to what campaign that they're in. Um, and they are provided by modules that you may or may not purchase. So if you get one for free, it might include a desktop decal. Sorry. If you purchase a number of modules, like for example, I've got the Rage of Demons campaign, I've got the Dungeon Master's Guide, Sword Coast Adventures Guide, things like that. They've all presented a different group of decals that I can now choose from to provide a little bit of atmosphere to the players. And as I've said earlier, they're not specific to a given rule set. But that's not necessarily the complete list of extensions that you could eventually see here. The Fantasy Grounds forums have a large list of extensions that enhance capabilities that exist within Fantasy Grounds, add additional capabilities. For example, there is a player sheet hit point total module that's out there, and what it does is it totals how many, or it shows the players how many hit points they actually have, because Fantasy Grounds by default shows you the wounds you've taken and how many hit points you have left, not your total. So an extension has been written to be able to provide that, and that's with the Classic Edition. It's not yet ready for Unity, as far as I am aware. But there is a huge list of extensions that are available. Additionally, there are third-party markets that provide extensions that you can purchase and/or might be free and make use of them within a given particular campaign. And they would be specific to the campaign unless you enabled it in a given campaign. And you can choose to add additional modules or extensions rather to an existing campaign as you go forward. So if you find something that you think will be overly useful to the campaign that you're currently running, you can add that extension, and it will be there the next time you load it, as long as you've selected it in the extensions list, and that will remain selected until you deselect it. So it gives you the option of expanding the functionality of your campaign as new things become available. So let's go through the process of actually initializing a campaign. So this is step one, if you will, when it comes to actually going through the process of creating a campaign. So I'm going to, okay, there we go, call this Horde of the Dragon Queen. And I'm going to do a cloud private. I'm going to put in a test password or a temporary password of just that for now. I don't really need anything. I'm going to choose both language fonts, the player's handbook, and the Horde of the Dragon Queen decals, as well as the simple gray theme. And then I'm going to go through the process of actually starting that up. So I've gone ahead and clicked start. And this will go through the process of creating the folder structure where all of the campaign data will be stored. Things like your characters that are going to be connected, chat log histories, the state of your campaign as you progress through it. And then as you can see here, it has gone through and set up a very basic generic screen here. Now, I am using the simple gray theme. If you are using the default theme or not using a theme at all, you will get a different looking screen, but in general, the functionality is the same across the board. And the first thing that you will get is this campaign setup prompt, and I will go cover this in a little bit later. But before I do that, I want to show how you now access this campaign now that you've got it created. The next time you go in and try to load your campaign, you've got Fantasy Grounds loaded. You literally just select Load Campaign, and you choose the campaign that you have running. Now, this is the campaign I'm using through my Mines of Phandelver tutorial. So this is the campaign we literally just created. Now, I've gone ahead and I've left this as the cloud option. And I'm intentionally doing that so that I can show a player how they actually go through and connect, but that won't be part of this video. That'll be part of another video. And this is the password that that particular player is going to have to enter in order to actually connect to it. And I've chosen a private one just so that I don't get interrupted while I'm going through the process of executing this tutorial. So I've literally selected the Horde of the Dragon Queen module here. That's the one we literally just created. And all I have to do now is hit start. So I will go ahead and do that. And you can see that we're going through the same thing. So if you caught it just prior to this particular background showing up, what you initially saw was my system communicating with Smiteworks' cloud servers to set up an entry there so that players can now find my actual game on the listing of Fantasy Grounds instances that are out there. And that's literally it. So I've now reloaded the campaign. Now, you haven't actually got a campaign configured. You've just essentially initialized the framework that the campaign will work out of. And that's literally all we've done. And that's why I call this step one. But I wanted to show you how to reconnect to it if you closed it out and forgot how to get back to it or wasn't certain how to get back to it. Now, I'm back at the load campaign screen because there were a couple of things that I want to point out here. And that is that not 100% of this is static in the sense that the name of the campaign, that is going to be static. I don't think there's a way to rename that at this particular point in time. And I don't know why you would, to be honest. But you can change the password, so I can add a 4 here. I can change the GM name if I wish to. I can change the network type, so let's say maybe once a year you've invited everybody over to your place and you're all connected on the same network, but you still want to play the same campaign, or once a month or whatever. Maybe a few of them are international players out of the UK or somewhere in Europe or other parts of the world. And they're here for that particular visit. I've actually done that. You can actually change how players get connected to your campaign as part of that particular process. You can change your theme. You can change the background decals. You can add or remove extensions as required and as your campaign environment grows, if you will, or your needs change, things along those lines. If your public IP changes, you'll be able to get that information here to be able to inform your players if you're using the LAN option to be able to connect. If your internal IP changes, same thing. You can change the port. So none of this information outside of the actual title of the campaign is static. You can make changes as you need them depending on the needs you have at the time. Once again, there's one thing that I want to reiterate here, and that is specific to the LAN functionality. If everyone is on your network, meaning inside your house, physical premises, and they're attached to your internal Wi-Fi or cabled network, then they're going to make use of the internal IP address that's listed in this particular box here that I'm masking out. However, if you are going to be hosting players who are on different parts of the world or down the street, but are not physically attached to your network in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have the capability to be able to port forward or route traffic from your router or firewall through to the system that is where you're hosting the actual Fantasy Grounds server or campaign out of. If you don't have that level of experience, your safest and easiest solution is to use the cloud option. If you have that experience, you're familiar with it, you've done it, you've used Fantasy Grounds for years, and you've had to do it for years, there's no reason why you have to change. This just simplifies the ability for players to get connected to your environment or to your campaign. And really, it just opens up the ability for other people who are not necessarily familiar with networking technologies or terminologies to be able to still use Fantasy Grounds and enjoy a game as a result, and be able to host it as a result too. So that's literally where the cloud feature comes into play, and I want to thank Smiteworks for being able to add that functionality, because it's not uncommon to look at the forums and see a DM having an issue, and their issue is because either their ISP doesn't allow port 1802 to come through, or any port for that matter to come through through their ISP device, whether it's the cable modem or fiber optic entry point or whatever. Um, and then they have to go to extremes just to be able to allow their players to connect. There are GMs out there that have never been able to get a game going because of that. Um, and I'm glad that Smiteworks has come up with a solution and found a solution that appears to resolve that particular issue. There is one minor point. Right now, the listing that is available when you select cloud isn't overly large. I think it's like 500 entries or something like that. I don't know if it means it's going to scroll each time you do that or if it can only show 500 entries. But 500 games going around the world, that is good. That means Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Cypher, Starfinder, whatever game is going out there is growing. That means that there are people playing. And that is a good thing because I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love it when I see other people playing it. And I love it when the community is able to do so because someone has found a solution to a problem that has existed. So by the time that you're at this particular point here, what you have is an empty campaign framework. And you haven't loaded up a campaign, you haven't loaded up any supplements or modules, you haven't finalized the game settings and optional rules that you want to use, and that's done through this particular setup window. But I've already got a video called Fantasy Grounds Unity, Finalizing the 5e Campaign Setup Part 1, where I explain the steps from this part forward. I needed to replace the video that was explaining the initialization part due to the fact that Smiteworks made some changes to that whole process. So this video was designed to replace that particular video and lead into the next video, if you will. So with that in mind, that'll be the end of this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comment section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.